Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today I'll be reviewing Asterios Polyp by David Mazzucchelli. And we really need to talk about this book because where has this book been all my life? This is legitimately, I think, one of the greatest graphic novels I have ever read. This is, I think, something that you can hold up as being a pinnacle of this medium. You know, it's not just great. This is the kind of book where if you've ever spoken to someone who like poo-poos comics and says like, oh, comics aren't those a little childish? You can hand them Asterios Polyp, or better yet, smack them across the head with it and say to them, oh, if comics are childish, then explain Asterios Polyp to me. Because if you read this and you don't walk away thinking that just being astounded by what is possible in the graphic novel medium, then that's your own problem. Then you need to do some soul searching, because this is such a perfect example of what the medium is capable of. And David Mazzucchelli just delivers a masterclass of just not just writing, but just fundamental drawing, lettering, coloring, everything. Everything in this book services the story that he is telling in a meaningful way. Let's jump into it. What is Asterios Polyp? Who is Asterios Polyp? Asterios Polyp is a character he's a middle-aged man. He is a respected architect who considers himself a leader in the field, a high intellectual, despite the fact that nothing he's ever designed has actually been constructed. He is a paper architect, and he throughout his life he was a womanizer. He's very full of himself, and the story begins with his apartment going up in flames, and he, from that, just takes the money that's left in his wallet, buys a bus ticket to wherever it can bring him, and just starts a new life in like the Midwest or somewhere, just vague Midwest state. And while he's doing that, we are getting his life story in flashbacks about what he was like as a professor, and more specifically, what we spend a lot of time with is his marriage to his ex-wife, Hannah, who is a bit of a younger woman, a Japanese-American modern artist who worked in sculpture, and just seeing through this retrospective how their relationship kind of went wrong, how Asterios got to this point in his life. At first, I was not super engaged in the story, and I was mostly just really impressed by the visual imagery that Mazzucchelli created. But by the end, I did find the story of Asterios to be really engaging. Putting together the puzzle of his life to determine why he is the way that he is, and what he did to lose Hannah, because she is his ex-wife. So putting all those pieces together was really fascinating. But more than anything, seeing how David Mazzucchelli would use the medium to emphasize these points, it was so damn impressive. Something that drives me nuts with a lot of comics is that they don't realize that it is a one-of-a-kind medium, and that they could do things with it that other things can't. Things here that you can do visually that you can't even do in film, or maybe in animation. But not even that, because the use of lettering. I've never seen such beautiful, meaningful lettering before in a comic. I've seen instances, of course, where maybe certain characters will have their own lettering style to denote, just something about their personality. But I've never seen it where every single character, no matter how minor they are, has their own lettering style. Not just the way that the letters are drawn, but the difference between characters who use all uppercase, some of them that you will use lowercase. Typically, lettering in comics is all uppercase. You might not even like notice that consciously, but that's just how it is. But there are characters in here that don't use capital letters. The word bubbles are all different. So Asterios, his word bubbles are all perfect rectangles, right angles on all his word bubbles. Usually you only see that on like narration boxes. But it makes sense for his character because he is the architect. He is very precise, and he's got precise thoughts about the world and the way that things should be. And so that fits his that style of lettering fits him as a character. There's another character that he meets who is like this kind of sort of hippie chick who's very like into like astrology and all that stuff, and her word bubbles are really like balloony, and the words are like a calligraphy, almost like a script, where it's just a lot of rounded lines, and it just kind of re-emphasizes like the type of character she is. That character has a small child who's constantly just running around, and so all of his word bubbles, they're usually there's just one word in the bubble, and it's kind of like pushed to the side to emphasize that he's moving, and the words are kind of like being left in his dust. Like that kind of thoughtfulness, I've never seen something like that before in the lettering. The coloring also similar. I'll show some examples of this, so I'm not just talking at you. I'll show in a minute, but a lot of the coloring is specifically chosen. Like the sequences are muted colors. They'll usually only have maybe 2 to 4 colors, and even then they'll just be variations of the same color, of the same blues, of the same purples, with one other contrasting color. And that is important because Asterios is a character who is obsessed with blacks and whites, with duality, with, it is good or evil, it is this or that. And this stems from the fact that he had a twin in the womb that did not survive. And so he is a twin that never got to meet his counterpart. And throughout the book, he's constantly comparing things and saying things. Oh, it's about the battle between this and that. It's it's the comparison, and other characters try to maybe rebut him and say like, well, it's not just this or that. There's stuff in between. But he's locked in on just that worldview, and the coloring reflects that. The coloring is very much, it's either this or that, which it gets paid off in the end when after Asterios has a little bit of an arc, more colors kind of start to come into the palette. It's so interesting and just well thought out. The colors are also used in instances to convey characters' emotions. I'll show an example of that as well. And the art in general gave me big Will Eisner vibes. This isn't a comic in the way where you'll see just panels everywhere on the page. There's open drawings, just like sometimes there's a full splash. There will be panels just kind of off to the side, but for the most part, it's just it just kind of flows into itself. There isn't a ton of sequential panels. It's just art that's just presented to you, and it's really beautiful and so precise and well thought out. And maybe don't even realize it at first, but as you proceed in the book, you start to see repeating visual motifs, and then you go like, oh, he kind of set that up earlier. We saw this similar image here, and it didn't mean anything at that point. But now, if I go back and I reread this, now that visual image does have meaning. Wow, that's cool. It's so full of interesting visual ideas. It's using the medium to its fullest, and that's why I think it is one of the greatest graphic novels I've ever read. Because even if you don't super dig the story, even if you don't really care about Asterios, which I would get, I would say the writing is maybe my least favorite part of this book, even though it is still really good. It can be very challenging. It can be a little bit too esoteric. But even with that, you have to acknowledge that Mazzucchelli is at the absolute top of his game in sculpting a visual story and using every piece of the page to tell the story that he is trying to tell. Now, I would like to cut away and show you some examples of just some sequences that stood out to me. Honestly, I could go through this whole book and talk about how every page has something meaningful on it, but we don't have time for that. So let's take a look at just a few. So this right here, this I flagged as an example of Mazzucchelli using just a simple visual to set up a recurring motif. You don't realize it's going to be recurring at first, but then when it comes back in the future, it really stands out to you. This is going back to when Asterios first meets Hannah, and she's telling him about her life. And first of all, we notice just like the saturation of the like rose pink throughout the page. On all of Asterios's pages, typically the backgrounds are white. So we're immediately cutting away to the pink background to show that this is her speaking her life. And you could even, I love this little, the page curling away, showing them in the background still talking while we get the highlights of her life. The sentiment here is that she was always precocious as a child, but overlooked by her parents in favor of her brothers, who were older and just also achieving accomplishments. So while she's talking about that, we have in the background a spotlight that is just missing Hannah, who is, sad just to the left of it, not getting the attention. That's what it implies when the spotlight's not on you. And it continues on to the next page as well, where she talks about how now that she's older, people do try to actually give her accolades, but because she was used to being pushed on the back burner as a child, she doesn't feel comfortable accepting those accolades as an adult now. So she's still outside of the spotlight, doesn't feel comfortable accepting that type of praise. And then this is a fast forward here to the first time Asterios sees her apartment and sees her artwork specifically. And he tells her that these are really strong, and she initially basks in that moment, because she respects his opinion. So this actually means something to her. So the spotlight is now on her and she accepts it. But then, against her will, the spotlight starts to move off of her again. And the reason for that is Asterios, a selfish kind of guy, self-centered kind of guy, he is now talking about the art and putting his own meaning into it, saying how, I could see how you're grappling with the reconciliation of opposites. There's a palpable tension between order and chaos, the concrete and the imagined, man and nature, the rational and irrational, humor and horror, fragility and fortitude. And meanwhile, she's in the background speaking very quietly, well, actually, I don't see it that way. I guess that's one way of looking at it. And I talked about how word bubbles being different for everybody. Look at how, just solid and imposing his are. Just those right angles with the sharp corners, they leave an impact. Whereas hers she has a rounded word bubble. She has lowercase letters, whereas he has all capital letters. He's dominating this conversation, and this is their two different personalities. She's shyer, he's more confident, but it's a little bit more arrogant, and he's pulling that spotlight over to him, and that's brilliant visual, visual metaphor for these characters together. And there is more examples of spotlight going on throughout the book, but I don't want to, give everything away. This sequence I want to showcase as another excellent example of not just lettering, but of the use of color and just also David Mazzucchelli's drawing chops. So this is a scene in which not Mazzucchelli, Polyp and Hannah, they've slept together, and in the morning, he shows her that there is a camera in the corner of the bedroom. And when she hears that, she is furious. And how can we tell that she's furious? Because look at the color change. She has an aggressive, attentive word bubble there that's all in red now. That's the change in her mood. then the striking slap. Look at how great the lettering on that slap is. Are you kidding me with that? And it's red to offset the cool blues and whites of the rest of the scene. And now she is no longer drawn in that clean line, blue line style that Asterios is. She is represented as this red, just like manic energy of just like noodling and scratching with a pen, whereas he has been broken down into like this architect's dummy, which makes sense. He is, again, an architect. He sees the world as very orderly, between this and that, very organized. And again, the scene I showed you previously where he was looking at her art, where he was talking about the tension between the concrete and the imagined, man and nature, order and chaos, that this or that. So that's kind of what, when you break him down, he looks very orderly like that. But she is emotion driven, so she is a more emotionally drawn character in this situation. And Asterios then like diffuses the situation by explaining why he does it. He's not recording it for like sexual thrill. He actually has a camera in every room of his house, and he explains it goes back to when he found out that he had a twin that didn't survive, and throughout his childhood he always felt like there was somebody looking over his shoulder, or he would look back and he would expect to see somebody there, and they weren't there. So by having the camera in the house, it kind of helps him to create an actual analog for somebody that is with him, watching over him, to fulfill that empty space of his twin that he never got to meet. And the repetitive motif of the this or that, the twins, the two bodies that are in this case connected and then being separated. Even Asterios's head shape is itself. It's like Janus, the was that a Greek god or Norse god, something like that. The character who has the two faces on each side. The back of his head is pointed just the same way that his nose is. So if you draw a straight line down the center, the only thing separating this from that is the chin. It's just so well thought out. And Asterios does calm her down, and you could see the transition where she understands why he does what he does and why he does this and what he's talking about. And so she fades from, her emotions cool back down, and she becomes, the line drawing again. And then they coil up together again, just like what we just set up on the previous page, like the two twins of each other in the womb, like they just become entwined and they join together. It's stuff like that, just like using the visuals, using every aspect of everything, the lettering, the colors, the composition. It's incredible. I love this book. So there you have it. I loved Asterios Polyp. I loved this book so much, and the price tag on this book is pretty hefty. It's been around since 2009, and there still isn't a paperback edition. So you have to get the hardcover, and I think the price has gone up since it came out. I think it's $50 now. That's a big investment for a book that you have never read before or you're not sure about. It's not a superhero comic. It's just its own thing, but it's totally worth it. I got this from the library. I plan on going and buying my own copy to have on my shelf forever, because this is a beautiful book that is a perfect example of what this medium can do. It's something that I will be revisiting over and over again in my life. I will hold this up amongst the Mount Rushmore of comics. You were talking around like with Mouse and with Watchmen, like stuff like that. This is that good. I really want to impress that on you. If you just are obsessed with the art of sequential storytelling, sequential art storytelling, the way that I am, you're gonna just absolutely adore this book. I will give an arbitrary and subjective grade of 10 out of 10 to Asterios Polyp by David Mazzucchelli. I thought this was just phenomenal. Let me know if you've read this and your thoughts on it in the comments below. I hope you liked it as much as I did. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.